you see people who once had, and probably still deep down do have these principles of what it takes to be a free nation and to be a free person. All of that gradually segues into a new outlook, which is who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. So this becomes the principle, the new principle. We are the good guys, and we should be able to use any means necessary, as our opponents like to say, by any means necessary, to make sure that the good guys come out on top. And it makes no difference what tactics you use. They consider themselves as players in a game of world domination, and they're working together against the stupid people like us who are saying no, no, no. They're all against us, but they may fight each other for dominance in that playing field. And I think once you understand that we're not dealing with the old strategies of nations at war, that's not happening, even though they'd like to present it as such. And it can be made to look like it because people will get killed and there'll be soldiers perhaps and missiles and all that kind of stuff. But the old style of warfare is over.
I wanted to hear your thoughts on who or what perhaps you think rules the world. What you're about to see is our latest exclusive interview with the one and only G.Edward Griffin. Just incredibly insightful. We go over so many incredibly important issues. And of course, this is a man who's 94 years old who has been talking about this for over 65 years. Absolutely incredible, and one of my favorite people to go to for insights. So you're going to enjoy this. But before we get into it, I urge people to check those links below. We have heavensharvest.com for long-term storable foods that are non-GMO. There's organic kits, heirloom seeds, water filtration and storage, and books on how to get started. Right now we have an amazing sale, 25% off on everything here in the United States with free shipping if you use code WAM, W-A-M. Things are getting crazy. We need to be prepared. And of course, one of the main goals for the global establishment is for us to be dependent on them. So do not put yourself in a position where you are dependent. From winter storms to attacks on the food supply, this is an opportunity for people to get prepared today. So I hope people go and check that out. Again, that's heavensharvest.com, code WAM, W-A-M, and make sure to hit that like button, share on social media, hit the notification bell, and hit subscribe if you have not yet already. And anyway, without further ado, here is our interview with G.Edward Griffin. Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we're joined by the legend himself, G.Edward Griffin, author and, of course, speaker, someone that most of you already know. We've had lots of interviews with him in the past, and always very consistent in his message. His 65 years of speaking out and exposing that which lies in the shadows, which we're going to go into a little bit today. I urge people to check the link in the description for redpillexpo.org. It is coming up in Las Vegas, Nevada, July 11th and 12th of 2026. Of course, you could use our code WAM, W-A-M, to save money on your tickets. And I urge people to go out because the Red Pill Expos are absolutely incredible, amazing speakers, and of course, great community that everyone can really learn a lot from. So I urge people to check that link in the description. But anyway, I want to dive right into this. Ed, there's so much happening in the world. It feels like this month of January so far it's like 40 years have gone by in 1 month. So much is happening. And I want to get into something that I've noticed psychologically happening among a lot of people. Both the left and the right are guilty of this within a so-called paradigm. Two wrongs don't make a right. Something I learned when I was 3 years old. Most of us did, but yet these days it seems like things are very much shifting in this way. If we don't bomb Iran, Iran might bomb us. Or if we don't put military police in the street, what will we do about mass migration? Again, two wrongs don't make a right. And of course, right now I'm seeing a lot of Americans call for, in some ways, gun control. Oh, you can't walk in the streets with a gun. Trump said this a few days ago. Kash Patel has recently said it's illegal to go outside and carry a gun. And of course, this happens after Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse and protester, was shot, I believe, 11 times by ICE insurgents in Minneapolis. It's causing a lot of protests, a lot of anger. And of course, if I say mass migration is bad, I'm a hardcore right winger. If I say militarized police are bad, I'm a hardcore left winger or a communist. I want to hear your thoughts on these mental gymnastics surrounding the current state of the world right now, the news we're all witnessing, from war to, of course, domestic issues, where it's like it has to be this side of the paradigm or that side of the paradigm, or else you're that other side. It seems like we're in a point of no return right now. Everything is absolutely chaotic when it comes to dialogue. You can't say anything without being accused of being something else. I wanted to hear your thoughts on how this is really turning in January of 2026 and going forward for this year.
Well, Josh, I can't imagine saying it any better than you just did, but it needs to be said over and over and over again, because even us old war horses can be tempted into that rationale, you know. I've often commented that this whole business of fear porn, as we like to call it, getting everybody afraid of everything, is quite an effective psychological warfare tactic, as you can well imagine, because when a person is afraid, and the more afraid they are, the less reason they are able to muster up. They can't. I can relate to that because I've been in situations where there's been something that happened very suddenly, very life-threatening, and all reason goes out of your mind. You're just thinking about how do you survive, how do you get out of the way. There's a truck coming at you or something like that. In this case, that was it. I thought of nothing except getting out of the way of the truck, and of course that's the whole reason that this tactic of fear is so effective and so common today, because our enemies, I say that advisedly, we have lots of enemies among us. They are experts at this. I think they probably go to school and read textbooks and go to classes and practice it and so forth, because that is perhaps the most important starting point for conquest of a free people, is to get them to stop thinking about being free and let them worry only about surviving. And that's really what we're talking about, is that none of these people, or very few of them at least, would be falling for that trick if they weren't in actual state of great fear of what's about to happen in any instant, or in perhaps a longer cycle of time, what's going to happen next week, you know. And Americans, I think, are getting into that position today where they're incapable of thinking about principles. I've often said that if you're underwater and you know you've got to get to the top, you're not interested in talking about constitutional principles or right or wrong. You've got one thing on your mind, and that's getting to the top of the water so you can breathe. And so this is the mechanism we're talking about. And it's not just a phenomenon that's interesting and worth looking at. It's a weapon of war, and it's being used very professionally and skillfully by our enemies against us. And that is the thought that people don't have time to think about because they're afraid.
Yeah.
So they're even afraid to think about how they're being manipulated with fear, because all they can think about is we're in terrible straits. And so that's the entry point of looking at this. And it raises another issue, because what happens, as far as I can see, in that kind of an environment, is that people who normally would have a lot of respect for political principles or constitutional principles or the traditions of America, or whatever you want to call it, there's certain values that I think we in the United States were very fortunate to have, that were slowly built over not just decades, but over hundreds of years. And they didn't happen all at once, but they can be lost all at once on a state of fear as a weapon of war. And so you see people who once had, and probably still deep down do have, these principles of what it takes to be a free nation and to be a free person. All of that gradually segues into a new outlook, which is who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. So this becomes the principle, the new principle. We are the good guys, and we should be able to use any means necessary, as our opponents like to say, by any means necessary, to make sure that the good guys come out on top. And it makes no difference what tactics you use to be victorious. You are the good guys, and so therefore it's okay to murder, to steal, to lie, to do anything else, because you're the good guys and the other guys are evil, and we must defend ourselves against these evil people. You see that in a less, I observed it very, very painfully over the years at a lesser level when people say, well, it comes time for election, we don't vote for candidates in America for a long time.
Yeah.
We vote against candidates. We say, well, I don't like this candidate. That guy or that gal is horrible, but the other one is even worse. And so we've got to support this the lesser of two evils is a sort of a variation of that idea. It's not a question of values or principles. It's a question of who are the good guys and who are the bad guys.
So, Ed, I mean, these days people really think, oh, well, this time it's different because it's Trump. And I hear the word pragmatism come up a lot, which, for something that's supposed to be practical, it's not very practical. This idea that, okay, for now, I'm going to give up my principles because this time it's different and he has the right ideas. And therefore, if this time war isn't so bad, this time a police state isn't so bad. I mean, what do you think about this idea of pragmatism used as an argument for what we're seeing today?
Well, that's a tough one because as much as I hate the idea of pragmatism, there's a place in the world for it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, you have to make a choice, and you've got to make sure you're taking the better choice. If you're stuck on a ledge on the edge of a cliff, and you're half a mile in the air, you've got to decide, well, what do you do? And you have to be pragmatic about it. Do you just sit there and wait for somebody to rescue you, or do you think you can scale back up to the top? Mm-hmm. And you better make a right choice because if you don't, you're going to be through. So there's a room for pragmatism, but that's the way it's used generally in society today. A pragmatic person is one that has no principles at all, except the ultimate rule of war. There's only one ethic in war, they say, and that's to win. Mm-hmm. There's only one sin, and that's to lose. Mm-hmm. So when you're convinced that what you're losing is your own life and even your own freedom, you're willing to risk your life and your freedom in order to obtain that little niche of safety over the average. If you didn't choose that, then you lose it completely. So it's a brain game is what it is. Yeah. And when the people that do not have your best interests in mind also control the media and your sources of information and the vocabulary that's used to present news to you, and in other words, they frame it in such a way that psychologically you don't have a chance of coming to a good decision, even if you're pragmatic, because the information will be distorted and you won't be dealing with facts. You'll be dealing with propaganda. So it's a tough one. And there's no solution to it except to wake up and don't believe this most stupid of all things, and that is that the government is here to help you. Yeah. I mean, people think that, well, it's the government. We voted for these people. And I wouldn't vote for anybody that was bad. And since I voted for this person, he must be good because I voted for him, And they're children. They've never been to school in real world politics or sociology or anything like that. So that's the dilemma. And then I'm saying you summarized it very well when we started off. How do you deal with that? And there's only one way to deal with it, and that's to take a deep breath and don't get too excited and don't start calling people by the names that just enrage them further and calling them stupid. They're not stupid. They're just being programmed. And the more intelligent they are, it's like a computer. The more power a computer has, the easier it is to program it, if you know how. So the smartest people are often the ones that fall for these things, and they think that it's because they're using their intellect, and they don't realize that they're being manipulated.
Well, there's a block up in a lot of people's brains. It's not that they're stupid. It's, for example, the other day I'm talking about how I'm not supportive of leftist policies or right wing policies. I'm not left or right. And they said, okay, well, then what are we supposed to do with from the middle? And I said, hold on. Being not left or right doesn't mean I'm in the middle either. It's the same symptom of the same problem. And it's really hard to get that through to people because they're raised and they grow up and they're not educated, they're indoctrinated with this idea. It has to be within this system. The solution to the problems this system created have to be within this system. You mentioned something that reminded me of the Reagan quote from the late 70s, which is ironic because he ended up being a big time collectivist. No surprise there. But he said one of the most dangerous sentences in the American language or in the English language is I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And of course that is true. And then of course he started running drugs to LA from Nicaragua. So we can't really expect anyone to fix any of these problems. But one of the things that we've seen a lot of recently, Mr. Griffin, is like what we saw with Venezuela. Maduro, awful person. I was personally banned from Venezuela for years, going back to 2015 by Maduro himself, because I was reporting on him negatively about the hyperinflation and everything there. But that doesn't mean, therefore, the CIA should run Venezuela. And it's like today, it has to be one or the other. What do you think the goal is in Venezuela? It's clearly not about narco-terrorism. It might not even be entirely about oil. It could have something to do with the dollar, but there's a lot of confusion over what the overall agenda is there. And especially considering it's another example of people saying, well, it's this or that.
Well, you can start off with, even though you don't understand what the real motives might be, you can be nearly 100% sure that what they're telling you is not true. Mm-hmm. So that clears the field considerably right there. What is left other than what they tell you? Well, you think oil has got to be a major part of it, and I think it is. But I think there are other things too, as our friend Michael Yan likes to say. It's roots and territory. You know, in other words, it has to do with the bigger picture and the long term, even beyond generations. It's looking to world dominance. Who's going to be the chief players on the chessboard when this thing finally solidifies into that new world order they keep talking about? So their views and goals are much bigger than ours. I don't think the people who are laying the strategies for our collectivist world upcoming, I don't think they think of themselves as nationalists at all, regardless of their nation of birth or where they live. They're looking at it as a global structure, and they're trying to build that. So it has nothing to do with nationalism, America versus China or anything like that. Even the Chinese and the Venezuelans and the Cubans and you name it, the ones at the top, most of them have this international perspective, and they don't think of themselves as citizens of a particular nation. They consider themselves as players in a game of world domination, and they're working together against the stupid people like us who are saying, no, no, no. They're all against us. But they may fight each other for dominance in that playing field. And I think once you understand that we're not dealing with the old strategies of nations at war, that's not happening, even though they'd like to present it as such. And it can be made to look like it, because people will get killed and there'll be soldiers perhaps and missiles and all that kind of stuff. But the old style of warfare is over. The new style is the psychological thing, the economic warfare that's going on. And the enemy really resides not in other countries, but he could be our next door neighbor today. And so that's, most people in America and free people around the world do not see this picture. It's an impossible thing to see because it's so horrible. And it seems like it seems like it's so impossible to combat. But it's only impossible to combat if you don't see it. Mm-hmm. Once you see it, I think nations and people around the world could unite against this common enemy.
Mm-hmm. And it's something I want to get into a little bit with you. And it's also like the technocratic warfare we're seeing. We saw Donald Trump at the World Economic Forum recently, and of course, we have a lot of his administration saying we are breaking down the world order of yesterday and we're going after globalism, which isn't very apparent by his actions, but nonetheless, it's what they're saying. At the same time as we have Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, declaring a new world order with China, and of course, we've heard that term "new world order" many times, and in that time frame, there have been multiple world orders that have changed to some degree, from militarism to, of course, what it seems to be today, moving into a full-fledged technocracy where they don't necessarily need militarism as much if they can control you by convenience, by your devices, by everything that you do or say on a day-to-day basis with, social credit scores, digital IDs, all this stuff.
Yeah.
When they say Trump is destroying the old world order, I always say, well, of course, exactly. That's the point. It's using his name to destroy the old world order to move into the new one. There has to be a new one. What do you think that new world order looks like now? Because it doesn't seem like the new world order that George H.W. Bush necessarily was talking about on September 11th of 1991. It seems like a very different new world order.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it's one of my pet peeves. You're quite right, by the way. Everything you said, I agree with totally. The word world order, new world order, and especially in the terms in which it has been used in our lifetime, certainly suggests bringing nations of the world together and making a one world government. Well, that's still the goal, but it has to be described differently now. The goal is not to bring nations together, but to bring humanity together. Nations are out. See, you don't have to have a world order of nations to have world order, according to their view of what that means. All you have to have is one conglomerate blob of people that are all ruled by a central authority. Well, what is that central authority? We've always thought, until fairly recently, it would be a body of representatives of the various nations, all speaking together, equal voice and so forth, but there was a single body. Well, remember, nations are now out of this. The people have to be ruled by something other than nationalities and political rulers, and that's where technocracy comes in. Now, there's a big debate out there as to whether technocracy is an entirely new phenomenon, or is it just a new variant of an old phenomenon called collectivism? Most people are describing it as a new phenomenon. I don't see it that way. I just see it's a new variant of collectivism, because the only difference really between this so-called latest evolution in this concept is that we are getting rid of politicians. That's the idea. We're going to replace them with scientists and machines and computers and AI and so forth. So we're being conditioned now to say, well, we don't need representation anymore. In fact, that's dangerous, because you get demagogues. Yeah, well, that's true. We still have demagogues, but now the demagogues are the scientists, and they're hidden from view. We don't even know who they are. The ones who program AI and tell us what AI is going to tell us and so forth. People don't realize that AI is and will always be programmable. It has to be. And otherwise, well, anyway, that's another topic. We'll come back on that. But we just won't see who our rulers are, because they'll be writing code and they'll be generational, and they may not even have any names that we would recognize or want to. It's a new system, but behind them, behind those scientists and those code writers, there are people who control the money of the world, for example, like the international banking cartel. That will not go away. It'll just morph into a system of digital control over people, and what used to be the banks and the government will form into something they'll call a technocracy. But it'll be the same people and the same rules and the same objectives. It'll be repolished and reframed and put on a different shelf and all that kind of thing. But it's the same idea. After you eliminate the question of who the rulers are they politicians or are they scientists and machines? Once you move that aside, everything else is the same as the old battle between individualism and collectivism. The individual will be subordinate to the collective, and all the arguments and all the laws and everything will be essentially the same. But the idea that now we don't need representative government, we'll have administrative government, which is something that was first thought of way back in the days of the Wilson administration. We're going to have administrative government. We're not going to vote for anybody because politicians are corrupt. So let's have administrators. Well, now the administrators are going to be the machines.
Yeah.
But it's the same argument once you realize the logic behind it.
It's like problem, reaction, solution, repeat. I feel as though they create problems so that they can then come in and say, hey, we have this convenient new solution for you. The machine will take over. It's much smarter than us, even though we programmed it. And of course, therefore, everything will be more secure under the guise of national security. We will come in and bring in this behemoth of a machine to regulate humanity, which is kind of crazy to think of, considering it's a non-empathetic machine, does not consider things in the way that a human would. We have Palantir drones deciding based on AI which children to blow up in Gaza. So, of course, this is a real issue. I've always said tyranny comes under the guise of convenience. If someone has a problem and it's like anything in the marketplace. If there's a problem and you create a solution for it, if you build it, they will come. Unfortunately, when you have the state creating all these problems and then saying, hey, we have this digital ID system, food rations, you'll never have to run out of food again. And you could get credits for all these different things if you rat out your neighbor. But it's better because you'll never be without. It seems like that has been a trap set for a long time. I mean, the Rockefellers met with a bunch of Marxists back in the 1910s and shook hands with them over this idea of technocracy. It seems like it's been in the playbook for a very long time.
Well, it has. Maybe not so perfected because it was difficult back in those days to imagine a computer system that could be programmed. Most people have no idea how much the existing AI is actually programmed. I mean, they don't call it programming, they call it training. Yeah. They want to make it sound human. We're going to train the system like we would train a human being or train a dog, but it's still programming, and it's the reason it's being developed so rapidly is because it is programmable, and it allows for this phenomenon of control behind the scenes by people you don't even know who they are. And especially if you get rid of the voting mechanism, you're not going to vote for them either. So it's completely an administrative world order. Now it's the administrative world order and not politics and not nations.
We're going to get right back to the interview with G.Edward Griffin right away. But before we do, I urge people to check that link in the description for Wave Watch 2.2. Pre-order today. Use code WAM, W-A-M, and you'll get over $100 off. 1,250 frequencies on your wrist. Helps you detox. It soothes your nerves. It boosts your energy, enhances cellular function. This is very important going forward for a lot of you. Of course, improving sleep is important, and we are inundated by bad frequencies. This is an opportunity to get the good stuff, endorsed by people like Dr. Brian Ardis and Dr. Motley. I urge people to go and check that out. Again, that's code WAM, W-A-M, and you will get over $100 off on your order. Anyway, back to the interview.
So it sounds like it's a big difference, but it's only a difference in language mostly.
Yeah.
The actual tools and the mechanisms are basically the same.
Yeah, I mean, the film Metropolis in 1927 actually quite accurately showed a future technocracy that takes place in 2026, interestingly enough. And in the film, it shows the machine is essentially Satan. Satan is represented by the machine, a loving leader that everyone wants to crowd around and bow to. And those that disobey, or those who cannot work any longer or cannot build up the machine because they're cranking all these knobs to make sure the machine keeps running and the city keeps running. If they cease to be able to continue to work, they are sacrificed in a giant fiery pit through the mouth of a giant Moloch statue. I urge, if anyone hasn't seen the film Metropolis, it's absolutely incredible. 1927
I'm going to write that down. I'm collecting these old movies that have messages like that, but that's one I missed. Metropolis, yes.
Yeah, just make sure you get the director's cut. The one with Freddie Mercury doing music in the background in the 80s when they re-released it is not very good. But Metropolis, absolutely a great example. And then, of course, Logan's Run in the 70s also predicts essentially a social credit system. Everyone domed off from the outside and kept in their little bubble. But don't worry, you're safe and everything is free and you don't have to worry. You will own nothing. And that's precisely what I'm seeing Elon Musk talk about these days. He says, well, AI will destroy humanity, but he's the number one person developing it. He is, well, not he, he's a representative of something. I don't think he's doing anything really. Who has the time? But also he says, well, most jobs will be replaced by AI in the coming years, but don't worry, you can have universal basic income. To me, that sounds like exactly what the World Economic Forum has been calling for.
It is exactly what they've been calling for. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like this is the Trojan horse. So if you say, oh, you know what? I don't think children should be trans. I think 95% of people would agree with that. The other 5% are crazy. However, just because you say that does not mean suddenly you're some anti-establishmentarianist who is ready to bring down the deep state. And unfortunately, things have become too simplified where if you say something that's just logical that a liberal would have said in the 70s or 80s, even 90s, now it's, oh, you must be on the right and you are fighting the establishment. And I feel like this is a trap. And I mean, in your lifetime, you've seen this shift dramatically from when you were a child to today. Could you have ever imagined a world where they're actually mandating digital IDs? I mean, we all knew it was coming, but it's actually happening.
Well, when you mentioned that, it wasn't too long ago that it was firmly rejected by the American people anyway. And the politicians said, oh, okay, we'll give it up. Well, they never gave it up. They said, we'll just wait a couple of years and try it again. And that's what's happening. And yeah, no, when I was first introduced to all of this, you're right, I could not imagine what the kind of a world in which we live today. I thought in the very beginning, well, it was these commies, they were taking over the world, you know. They got China, they got Cuba, they got, now they're in the streets. Remember, we better get serious about these communists. And I never realized that in the act of fighting communism, we were becoming more like communists in order to defeat communists, except we were using the wrong word. We were looking at it as communism. At that stage, I didn't know that there was very little, if any, substantial difference between communism and fascism. And in those days, I thought, well, all right, I've been taught in school that communism is extreme left wing. And what's the opposite? Well, extreme right wing. What is that called? Fascism. Oh, so if you have to oppose communism, I guess that means I have to be a fascist? And the answer was yes. And you see, that's the trick. They limit your options. They provide the debates, the topics that you can and topics you cannot debate. You couldn't debate the idea that there was something other than fascism opposing communism. You would never be allowed to present the idea that fascism and communism were the same. No, that's not true. Where did you get that ridiculous idea? Well, now, of course, I know deep in my heart and my brain, they are the same. I've studied it, I've chalked it. I can't tell you how many hours I spent down the communist bookstore in Los Angeles reading all their stuff. And then I got to reading the fascist material and I'm thinking, where have I read this before, you know? And so they can't fool me anymore, but it was easy in the beginning because I hadn't any of this information.
Yeah. Well, and I don't mean to jump around because we were talking about war before and we're talking about technocracy. I think they're all related. I think they're part of the same puzzle. I think at the end of the day, what we're dealing with is extreme collectivism across the board. It's a tumor that always grows. Collectivism begets collectivism. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on what do you think the overall agenda is in the Middle East right now? We have Israel clearly planting Mossad operatives in crowds in Iran, helping push this revolution there. We've seen this before in 1953, the coup, and of course in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution there. And now we are hearing, oh, well, Iran has killed 36,000 protesters, which might well be true. And if so, absolutely horrific. No one's going to promote Khamenei and say that he's a good guy, or any world leader for that matter. However, then the solution is, and it's such convenient timing for this, less than a year after a bombing, after the United States and Israel bomb Iran. Now it looks like we have justification to go into Iran and take over the country. Where do you think this is going to end? Do you see there being an imminent war in the near future in Iran? We've seen this with Iraq before. People claim it's different. I don't see the difference. What do you think?
Well, I have to admit up front what will probably be obvious in a second, that I'm not an expert on the Middle East. I'm not sure anybody is, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But it's a very mixed pot to say the least. But I do see it as part of a global strategy being used by these collectivists at the top. They're trying to just stir the pot, get everybody fighting everybody else. They want the war to spread around the world. They want everybody either actively engaged in a violent conflict of some kind or fearful of being engaged in a violent conflict. And they want blood flowing in the streets. They want any former unity that existed among different diverse components of society. They want that all shattered. They want everybody alone, and that makes them totally controllable and begging for protection. They want people to beg for this new collectivist system, and they're succeeding. It's a brilliant strategy. I wouldn't have thought they could pull it off, but that I do now. But in the beginning, I didn't realize how long they had been working on this strategy, how far back it goes in history, and in a crude form, of course. But there are people who have been promoting this general concept for many, many generations, and it's not a generational thing, interestingly enough. You think that most people who wanted to be tyrants were interested in doing that because of their own aggrandizement and so forth. And that's still true, no doubt. But there are millions of people out there working because of this idea, and they don't expect to see it in their lifetime. They're in a way, they're kind of like I am and you. We have an idea that we don't think we're going to see entirely in our lifetime, where we can have true freedom again and true unity and brotherhood in this world. It's not going to happen in my lifetime for sure, but I'm working like the end is here, because I want to do my part to bring it to pass. There are people on the other side that have that kind of passion for it, and it's hard for me to understand that, but I know that they're there, and you can see the trail. Their history goes way back centuries. So where am I going with this? And that is that I don't know what's going on in the Middle East, but I see the turmoil around the world all in a similar vein. They're trying to crack and destroy any semblance of successful society that might exist, so there'll be nothing but mush, and they can remold it any way they wish. And they'll do it because of fear, the idea that we're going to die or we're going to be living in a horrible situation. And in this state of fear, we will lose our reason and we will lose our principles, and we'll swap almost any principle for safety. That's the name of the game today. And once you understand that, you can see it everywhere.
Absolutely. And I want to add that, I mean, I think that there's, with everything coming to a precipice right now, at least it feels like that, the I guess you could say the massive amount of aggression we're seeing from governments around the world, from the shadow government, from the world order, if you will, to push forward these agendas as rapidly as possible right now. I see it playing out easily within the next 5 to 10 years. It sounds crazy. I've never said that before, but I feel like we're at this point where it's a breaking point. If one missile is shot, then everything kind of blows from there. We're coming up on Agenda 2030. They could be late to the game there, but they're pushing a cashless society in a big way. I feel like everything is coming to a precipice. So, I mean, I can see you easily being around in 20 years to talk about this. And maybe you will see in your lifetime the things that are coming to hit that precipice and at least start moving in the right direction. I don't think in the next 20 years we're going to have peace on earth, but I feel like there's going to be a lot more understanding about what's happening and a lot more, hopefully, action out of necessity. I wanted to ask you something though that it's kind of it's a big question, but also I'm sure you've had time to think about this over the years, and I've thought about it myself a lot. It's the question, who rules the world? And of course, it's a difficult one because it's people could say, oh well, maybe the Rothschilds do, or maybe this group of human beings do. I think it's more spiritual. I think it's beyond humans. I might sound crazy when I say it. In fact, I do sound crazy when I say it, but I feel like this is something more spiritual. Something is controlling the people at the top. People could call it evil. people could call it some kind of, I don't know, satanic agenda. I could be way off on this. And there are just some guys in an office at the very top writing down papers saying, hey, you have to do this. I don't think so. I think it's bigger than that. I wanted to hear your thoughts on who or what perhaps you think rules the world.
You're right. That is a big question, isn't it? That's probably about as big as it gets. It reminds me of myself over breakfast talking to my wife. I bore her to death with these questions. Why are we here? How is that possible? What is eternity anyway? If there's no beginning and no ending, then what is it? Where does it start? These imponderable questions. And you're right. I think we all have, those of us who are listening and to our inner selves, listening and looking at the world with a long lens. Most people, let's say, feel that there's something unusual, let's just say, not normal, or at least that we don't understand. I feel that way. There's something in which we're probably have no other word in our vocabulary to describe other than spiritual. Because it's not physical, it's not flesh and blood. It doesn't make any sense to the human race if you're a part of it. Maybe you're not a part of it, that you brought that up. And so it must be something else, and the only word we have is spiritual. And so, yeah, I think most people understand that there's this non-physical presence or guidance or element or atmosphere out there. And I think the reason is because we can't relate to it. We're not part of it. It seems so alien to us. And the question of, non-human creatures on this earth is not a closed question. I mean, it is open. And a lot of non-crazy people are asking that question because we feel that there's something else going on. I don't know what it is, but I have that sense. But the thing that scares me about that idea is that although it's easy to say, well, this is a spiritual battle, because I do believe it is. I like to warn everybody that it's not just a spiritual battle. We have to fight it at a very physical basis level, because we can't say, oh, well, just ignore those bad people that are doing all these bad things. We are the problem because we are sinners. Let's have a day of repentance or something like that, and then these bad guys at the top will go away. Leave them alone. It's us. We're the problem, not them. That's a very dangerous argument. And I think our enemy is pushing that argument into our group thinking. So I just want to warn people, this is a spiritual battle in my view, but it's not just a spiritual battle. We have to transform that spirituality or whatever it really is into actual action.
Well, and I agree. I think a lot of people ask the question, if there are puppet masters, who controls the puppet masters? And to me, it seems quite clear that something has to, because a lot of the moves that are made by so-called puppet masters to control others is not logical, in the sense that it's not always about control. It's not always about money. It seems often about self-destructive nature, the destruction of humanity itself. I mean, technocracy is a great example of simply destroying humanity itself. Or people will ask, well, if they're spraying the skies, why are the people that are in charge doing that? Their families live in that environment too. And it's like, exactly, I think this is bigger than humans. I think this is bigger than the people that are pulling the strings. I think it goes far further than that. And it's terrifying for a lot of people to think about, and for good reason. Most people want to just close their eyes to it. But if we're going to say, okay, well, we depend on that politician. Well, that politician isn't in charge. Well, who controls them? Well, this guy. Well, who controls them? Well, maybe that guy at the top. Well, who controls them ultimately? It's kind of like asking what happened before the Big Bang. Well, if there's a Big Bang, then what existed? And no one knows. And there's a 0% chance of us ever knowing. We could say God, but at the end of the day, what came before that? We don't have an answer.
Well, the best answer I've ever heard, I like it a lot, a little humorous, as you'll see. In the beginning, there was nothing, and then nothing blew up. Oh, I get it now. Yeah, nothing blew up.
Yeah, answers all my questions. Yeah, absolutely.
Any questions?
But okay, Ed, we're coming to a close here. It's so interesting talking to you, and I never write any questions when I interview you because I don't see a need to. I think ideas come up and we have a good conversation, and I'm always interested in your insights on these things. I wanted to ask you, is something I was thinking about throughout the interview today, if you have seen more recognition from your work recently, because I've been scrolling on social media a lot lately, doing all the things I shouldn't be doing, considering I'm preaching not to do these things. I'll be scrolling on Facebook and going through videos one after another, like I'm a 5-year-old with a tablet. And I see your videos come up constantly, videos of you from the 1960s, of course, famous documentary short that you did back in the 60s. I think you did 2 of them that are quite well known. I can't recall the names, but of course, for years, it was the Yuri Bezmenov video that was everywhere. And I'm starting to see your videos from the 1960s coming out a lot on social media, posted by people who are just discovering you. And they're discovering you as this young man in his 30s talking about communism and collectivism. And I wanted to hear your thoughts. Like, are you seeing kind of a growing recognition for the work you've done over the years in the past while due to social media?
The answer is definitely yes, and it's an amazing phenomenon. Naturally, I'm joyous to see it. And when I do see it myself, I think, oh, look at this. This is interesting. Oh, that's me. Not quite that bad, but I have forgotten doing many of those recordings. And this sounds ridiculous, but every once in a while we have to update our old books. Our books continue to sell year in and year out, which is an interesting phenomenon. But every once in a while, like somebody will find a spelling error or something, and we have to make a little adjustment. And then the new edition comes out, and I have to go through it and sort of make sure it's all in place before we give the order to print 10,000 copies again and whatever. And I find myself saying to my wife, "Hey, Pat, listen to this." It's like I'm reading this stuff for the first time, and I'd forgotten it. And oh yeah, I remember now, but yeah, I'd forgotten it.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is a great thrill. It's not an ego thing. It's so satisfying to know that this information is getting out, even though it's late. It's still never too late to know what happened in history. Mm-hmm. And I'm very encouraged by that. And what I'm trying to devote my life to now, for whatever time that represents, is not so much to disclose new unknown facts and hidden history, because a lot of people are now doing that and doing an excellent job. But my job is to try and promote, what do you do about it? I don't think our enemy cares what we know now. In fact, I think he probably wants us to know all of the things that he has succeeded in doing. Because if you believe in the expertise of Sun Tzu in his excellent book, The Art of War, the Chinese philosopher of 3rd century BC or something like that, to me, the most profound article of warfare is supreme excellence in warfare is to defeat your enemy without having to engage him in battle. And of course, just think about that. Of course, if you can convince your enemy that he cannot win, and therefore he will not fight, he will surrender and say, okay, you win. We don't have to kill each other. You win. And I think this is the phase that is probably going on today. I think our enemy wants us to know as much as possible about how far he has advanced in his control mechanisms, because that will discourage most people. Say, oh my God, they're everywhere. What can we do? We can do nothing. Oh, I hope I can avoid it somehow. Maybe I can escape to the mountains, or I can build a brick wall around my house, or I can save a lot of money, or buy silver and gold, and I can buy my way out of the. Very seldom do I ever hear. In fact, I've never heard anybody speak to me after a meeting or something and ask question and answer in the question and answer period. No one has ever asked me, well, Mr. Griffin, what can we do to win? It's always, how can we survive?
Yeah.
The thinking is completely defeatist. So many people deep in the heart think it's over. And so the enemy wins without having to engage us in the real battle, which I'm not talking about guns. That'll always play a role, of course. But the real battle today is psychological and attitude. And so that's what I'm trying to devote my time to now, is to put together a mechanism. We call it, we call it these things that will be campuses of Red Pill University. We want local organizations in every community that can confront our opponents face to face, not by sending an email or looking at a video, but actually go to the meetings, the city council meetings, participate in politics, run for office, make sure that the mayor's position is in the right hands, make sure that we have a good sheriff and all these things to rebuild the hardware, the brick structure, the foundation of a free nation again, because that's been shattered.
Well, that's something I want to finish off the video getting into with you. I do want to point out, as a callback to something you were saying earlier about finding old footage or old things that you were reading of your own. The amount of times I've forgotten about something and went, well, I think I did a video on this about 10 years ago, and I'll find an old video and I'll watch myself, which feels extremely egotistical and silly. But I know at that time I didn't forget it. I knew what I was saying then about that subject. I need to watch it and check over it. I find this is something that a lot of us that devote our life to doing this, and we take in a lot of information and we forget more than we know. It's a fact of life. And in these important times, we got to kind of look back at the things that we've researched in the past and try and understand it in correlation with what's happening today, because we're seeing a reset, and resets have happened many times throughout history. I've done a lot of work on history and ancient history, and a lot of it relates greatly. We're just in a different phase of it with digital technology now, and how do we fix it is so important. And one of those things that it's one of the main reasons I've enjoyed profoundly the past, 9 years now of Red Pill Expos, going back to 2017 in Bozeman, Montana. Now you have Red Pill Expo coming up July 11th and 12th in Las Vegas. I urge people to check out redpillexpo.org, O-R-G, over in the links below. And what do you expect from this event this year? Because obviously the world is absolutely crazy. So it has been for a long time, but it's progressively getting crazier. What do you expect to get out of this event in Las Vegas this summer for the Red Pill Expo?
Good question. I don't expect the world to suddenly become sane again on the 13th of July. But what I am hoping to see is a continuation of the process we have been pursuing all along, and that is not only expanding the understanding of what is going on in the world at a deeper level than who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, that's a huge step in itself. And it should be done, but there are others doing that as well. What my focus is to draw from that level to the next level up is, well, let's get organized and do something about it. And that's where we come to the Red Pill University and the campuses that I was referring to. From that will spring who knows what. But without that, nothing is going to happen, because people say, well, it's over. And what can we do? No matter how smart we are, no matter how diligent, how brave we are, we need unity, we need numbers, and we need leadership. And one of the things that we haven't even spoken about, one of the most powerful forces against us, is that our leadership has been preempted. Our enemy knew long ago that we would be looking for leaders against them. And they decided, okay, boys, what do we do? Wait and see what they come up with? Or do we provide them with leaders that are our people in disguise? Controlled op, of course. Mm-hmm. And that has been going on far greater than I ever realized. That my first realization of how far it had progressed without my knowledge was COVID. Because overnight, all of a sudden, every nation in the world, every major nation and most unmajor nations, were all repeating the same things and doing the same thing on cue within 24 hours of each other. So you could tell that this was not a spontaneous thing. It was organized. There were lines of communication. There were nodes. There were people in place waiting for instructions. I thought, oh my God, it's like a summer rain. You go to bed in the evening and the grass is green. You wake up in the morning and it's covered with mushrooms. Mm-hmm. Those mushroom spores were in the ground all along, but we didn't know it. And this is what, there's another feature of our problem, is because there are a lot of controlled opposition leaders, our leaders, in place, and we think they are genuine, and many of them are not. And that's it's a precarious position to be in. It's because how are you going to know the real ones from the phony ones? And one of the tests, of course, are they leaders on the basis of principle or expediency? Mm-hmm. Are they saying, we're the good guys and they're the bad guys? Or they're saying that they're doing things that no one must do, including us. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference. And that's one of the tests.
Well, Ed, actually, I wanted to point something out. It's something that I've been talking about a lot. I know people like David Icke have been talking about a lot, mainstream alternative media. I mean, it used to be, well, there's only these few channels on television. That's where you're going to be controlled, Operation Mockingbird. And now it's apparent that because the CIA didn't really care about manipulating newsletters in 1985, though I'm sure they did to some degree. But now when you have more people watching independent media than mainstream, then you got a new mainstream. I mean, by definition, if more people are watching it, it is mainstream then. And I've noticed among alternative media, and I'm obviously in alternative media, I have been for quite some time. And a lot of people I've known personally, I won't call out names, were clearly controlled opposition, and clearly, whether it be they are being paid for certain sponsors or different companies to be a certain way, or if they are legitimately meeting with government officials to control the narrative, the new narrative, under the guise of alternative. And that is a huge, huge problem that we face today. And I see it daily on platforms like X and on Facebook and on YouTube and on Rumble and all these places.
Everywhere. It's everywhere. It's like those mushrooms, actually. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought that up because, based on what I said before, it might be possible to misunderstand that I was saying that everybody who is saying the good things, like our message, mm-hmm. that they're all controlled opposition, because they're not. No. But many of them are limited severely by their sponsors. Mm-hmm. So if you want to know where the control is coming from, take a look at the sponsors mm-hmm. and see that's where the money is coming from. And right. Are they selling product that justifies that, or are they just pretending to be? So and people will say, well, you're going to sponsor my show. Well, thank you. And then sponsors, well, of course, we have to preserve our image, and we don't want to get too wild, and we would like to be able to have some control over that. Yeah. But it'd be very minor. Would you mind that? Well, no. How much were you paying us again?
Yeah.
And so I think they have entrapped a lot of good people by putting a ceiling on how high they can go in what they're saying.
Yeah, I do want to make sure that everyone watching knows that, of course, I do have sponsors and everything, but I would never allow myself to, face what they tell me to say. I always say what I think. And that's why I get in so much trouble, and I regularly end up bankrupt every year, because I'd rather be monetarily bankrupt than morally bankrupt. And, when we're fighting for humanity here, the last thing you want to do is say, well, you know what, maybe it's okay. Maybe humanity will be fine. I'm going to take this, $200,000 check and mislead people. That's just not what we're in it for. And we need to be consistent to the end, which is unpopular, but the right thing to do.
Well, I'd like to say one little addition to that. In most cases, I think this secondary category of people who are just financially involved and influenced by the paycheck, it's not that they're told what to say; they're told what not to say.
Right.
It's a few things you can say whatever you want to, but don't go beyond this point.
Exactly.
Don't start talking about the Federal Reserve. I mean, don't start talking about getting rid of the Federal Reserve. Just talk about how it needs to be investigated.
Yeah.
That's okay, but say nothing about abolishing it. Okay? You
Yeah.
got it? Oh, yes, sir. I've got it. Uh-huh.
Don't talk about Israel, that's for sure. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about, according to the algorithms on most websites, you shall not talk about Israel, which is rather suspicious. But those things are all true. And I think it's important that people know where they're getting their information from and have to look at record for that, how much people have slipped up. Changing your mind, of course, is totally appropriate if you do change your mind. But of course, when people move dramatically in a different direction, seemingly overnight, and then suddenly sign a big deal with the network for $1 million. I'm not going to say anyone's name out loud here, but I've seen it before. I've been approached. I got offered $1 million contract a few years ago for a major network, and they said, read the teleprompter. And I said, I got into this so I wouldn't be doing that, and I'm not going to do it now. And I think we have to be really on the lookout because information is extremely poisoned now and totally manipulated on all sides. And another reason why I really enjoy the Red Pill Expo is because every time I go there, it's not just the speakers, and the speakers are absolutely amazing, and I learn so much from them, but it's the people I'm talking to in the hallway. Every single time I go to a Red Pill Expo, I learn so much, not just from the speakers, but from someone I met at a booth outside of the event. So do you know where the event is going to be next, Ed? I know back in 2019, I was running Anarcho Vegas and you spoke at it, and it was quite a funny situation when you got there and your wife messages you and says, I just looked online where this event's taking place. It's next to a broken down old gentleman's club. It was so I'm guessing that was in Las Vegas. Where is this event going to be? I'm sure you got a better setup.
Embarrassing question number one. I can't remember the name of it. It's a former casino, but it's not operating as a casino now. It's been purchased and renovated as an event place without gambling. And I don't know if you can even buy any booze there. But anyway, it's not gambling.
No smoking inside.
Yeah, something like that. And I've seen pictures of it. Carlene, our event coordinator, went there last week and visited the place and checked it out. And we got online on Zoom and got the view of the place. It's really nice. It looks good, and it's all modern and everything. So but I can't think of the name of it. It's not on the Strip. It's not one of the famous places. But if you go to redpillexpo.org, you'll find the name of the place.
Excellent. And I urge people to do that. Again, these are amazing events. And you got, usually whenever I promote the Red Pill, it's almost too late. It's like a month before the event. So you guys got lots of months to prepare for this, to get your tickets cheaper for airfare, for whatever it might be. Of course, you have 6.5 months, and I urge people to go and check that link in the description, redpillexpo.org. You could also sign up to become a member of Red Pill University and, enroll or of course, donate to them and help them thrive. And I think it's very important that people get involved in this way because it's all about action rather than sitting and waiting for someone to do something for you. So again, redpillexpo.org. I will mention again, shamelessly, that you could use code WAM, W-A-M, and you could save a bit of money on your tickets for the Red Pill Expo. But nonetheless, whatever you end up doing, that link is in the description, and I'm looking forward to it. Ed, any final words on that before we go?
Well, I don't know. Final words. I don't think there is such a thing. But I think we pretty well covered it. And the old spiritual song comes to mind. It ain't necessarily so. Remember that song?
Yeah.
Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho. It ain't necessarily so. I think that's a good slogan. Maybe we'll adopt it. It ain't necessarily so. If you read about it in the news, it ain't necessarily so. So those are my final words.
Absolutely. That's great. Well, all right. As always, I really appreciate you joining us, Ed. It's always very interesting and insightful. And go and check those links below. There's much more to check out as far as solutions go in the description of all of our videos. As always, hit that like button, share on social media, hit the notification bell, and hit subscribe if you have not yet already. We are completely shadow banned via algorithm on almost every website that we're on. So all the more reason the likes help us reach more people. So in this technocratic system, we need those credits, right? Those social credits from you pressing that like button. So I appreciate it. And as always, Ed, thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, Josh.